Good evening, everyone. What a wonderful summer's evening we have tonight. The, Obviously, the temperature is quite high, so we've got the air conditioning on. So please speak up if possible, because we know it's a bit noisy. So this is the special audit and governance, primarily about the BEAM finances, and where we got the opportunity to ask some questions around that. To satisfy ourselves that the figures are as they should be or whatever. As I say, try and speak into the microphone tonight. It's probably going to be more important. So, apologies for absence.
Tonight we have apologies from Councillor Wilcox, and Councillor Jacobs is acting as his substitute, and Councillor Williams, for whom Councillor Connolly is acting as substitute.
Thank you very much. First key item, the minutes of the meeting 30th of June. Before us, we had the meeting minutes. I was really after any comments or a proposer or seconder for this. Bob?
Thank you, Martin. Can I just make a comment? The minutes are very professionally written, but they're a little bit anodyne. I don't think too many people reading those minutes would know that there was, to be fair, quite an air of criticism in the room. I appreciate the minutes aren't meant to be a verbatim account of what every member says, but I just wonder if the minutes could more accurately reflect the atmosphere that was in the room, possibly.
Okay, thank you then, Bob. Other than that, can I have a proposer or a seconder? You weren't there. Maura, you propose, and a seconder and table, Tom. Thank you very much. Can I have a show of hands? Those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. Those against and those abstaining? 2 abstentions. Thank you very much. That is carried. So my announcements today, really, I'm sure everyone's got a lot of questions and a lot of lines of inquiry they want to follow. What I would say is, I think in this instance, let's give everyone an opportunity to speak first before we sort of ask too many questions. So what I'll do is just obviously throw the questions open, or throw the floor open to everyone, but just ask a question and probably a supplementary, and then we'll circle back once everyone has asked a question. So, declarations of interest. Is there anyone who wants to declare anything around tonight's agenda? Does anyone work at BEAM other than the people in the room here? No declarations of interest? Thank you very much. Now, I think this is you, Sarah, isn't it? The BEAM business plan.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite a short introduction because most of it's part 2. But yes, following the Audit and Governance meeting on the 30th of June, during that meeting there was a request for the committee to be able to see the business plan and to be able to have a more in-depth look at it and to feel confident that they're sort of happy with it and to ask any questions and things. And the agreed date was 29th of July, which is today. So due to commercial sensitivities, much of the contents will be part 2 discussion, but hopefully there can be some initial part of the meeting that can be broadcast to the public. And there's also the option to look at the slides which can be seen by the public as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think that's a good point. Obviously, the general public and our residents probably would be better served if we try and keep it part 1 as long as possible. And obviously that means steering away from some commercially sensitive areas and some figures. But if anyone is obviously willing to ask questions maybe about process or the order of events, that will be great. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just noticed the slide up here, actually. So these two, I'll take it they're new financial measures. They would be straightforward BAU measures in any sort of private business. When exactly do they start from? So that's more of a procedural question for you.
Certainly, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Defley. These have been regularly monitored within Beam, but obviously given the scenario we found ourselves in the last quarter, Exec have quite rightly taken a much greater interest in some of the operational side of the business. So we are now kind of reporting these every month to Executive. There was some challenge at the last meeting as well in terms of what is the profit and loss position of Beam every day. And we do know that that's only one part of the picture here. And this slide attempts to kind of go through some of the reasons in that the income side of it does go, as you say, any business we're going to do this, but the income side of it's slightly unusual because it doesn't just go up all the time. It can go up and down. The reason for that is that when we get income in, some of that is due to producers and due to the cinema distributors. So some of that money then goes out. So whilst the income and expenditure is kind of a helpful measure of where we are, you have to combine that with a forecast to understand what the year-end position is and make all the kind of adjustments and all those assumptions as the year goes on. But what Exec have asked for is they'd like to see both the income and expenditure on a monthly basis and the forecast together. And those two kind of bits of information will give them a bit more reassurance we're heading in the right direction. So there is just only one other slide, you'll be grateful to know, following on from this, which does have those positions for Q1.
David.
We're here to discuss the business case, and the business case in its entirety was not published. It was withheld from the public. I think it's going to be very difficult for us to stay the right side of part two, frankly. All my questions are part two questions. So how are we going to manage that? Is somebody going to put a big red flag up when we stray into part two territory, or are we just going to assume that we're going to be in part two? And because I'm not in a position to make that judgment.
No, certainly. I mean, I'm giving everyone the opportunity to speak about things that wouldn't be in part two. So processes, dates of when people knew what or whatever. So other than that, if there's no more comments, obviously we'll move into part two. Bob.
I'm hoping this isn't a commercially sensitive question, so I pose the questions. I was just interested in how you track sales, promotions and marketing activity at the moment, and how agile this is as a process in being able to respond to lower than expected ticket sales, and how you would then employ extra marketing promotion to drive increased sales. Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. It's a great question. It's not commercially sensitive, so I'm very happy to answer it. In terms of tracking sales, we track sales on a daily basis across both theatre and cinema. In terms of how, if we look at theatre specifically, so every show that comes through Beam will have a dedicated campaign plan attached to it and a named member of the team looking after that campaign. I meet with the marketing and sales manager on a weekly basis, and we review all upcoming sales for essentially for the next 3 months generally. At that point, we review them against our targets. So every show that goes through the system has its own kind of commercial target attached. So we review those shows against target. Anything that is falling behind where we would expect it to be at that point, according to our kind of forecast sales curve, that's the point at which we review any additional actions or mitigating actions that we need to take. And that's when we revisit that campaign plan. Now, we normally do that in conjunction with the producer for that show. So where possible, we seek to recharge local marketing activity back to the producer. And this is something that we implemented as part of that commercialization of our show contracting that we touched on at the last meeting. And that's seen, a significant increase in overall recharging. So where possible, we recharge local campaign activity. If it's paid for, we recharge that back to the producer. So any additional activity that is paid for then will need to happen with the kind of the permission of the producer, or there may be an opportunity for us to share costs if there's a little negotiation that happens there. If a show is kind of falling behind where it needs to be, if a show is drastically behind where it needs to be, if it hasn't found its audience, if it's not moving, then we have a different conversation with the producer, and that will normally be around actually cutting our losses, cancelling the show, removing it from the programme.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I just had a follow up. I did a bit of Googling on how to improve ticket sales, and I found that there was a suggestion of employing dynamic ticket pricing. I know it's quite a contentious issue, isn't it? And I don't think I'm a fan, but I wondered if you considered that. And also there was a suggestion of adding premium options to extend visitors' experience. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Absolutely. Again, not commercially sensitive, so very, very happy to answer. So yes, dynamic ticket pricing is something we are exploring. We have met with providers of dynamic pricing kind of packages, I suppose. So this is essentially a system that sits on top of the ticketing system that we use, and that automatically works out demand. It works out where the ceiling for ticket prices might be, and it responds in some cases on an hourly basis in order to increase yield wherever possible. Now, dynamic ticket pricing is something that has been around across the industry for quite a long time. Predominantly, it's been used with venues where shows are much longer running. It is less common to see it across the regional sector, where perhaps a show might only be with you for one night or so. However, the winds of change are upon us, and that is starting to become a much more common conversation. So yeah, it's an active conversation for us. We do expect to implement a form of flexible ticket pricing in the future, so that we can, when we know that we have maybe a week-long show that is in high demand, where we know that we can employ this tool and switch it on and off at will in order to maximize income where we can. But at the same time, the systems that we are prioritizing investigating are systems that also will help us to reduce that ticket price to increase attendance. So yeah.
The question.
Absolutely. So there are a number of products on the market. We're focusing on the ones that will allow us to kind of do both ends. Now, implementing that across a program with so many different events may have its challenges, and that's why we're taking the time to investigate the systems properly, because every show, we agree the ticket prices with every single producer for every single show, and if those ticket prices are going to fluctuate, we need to be really clear about actually where the parameters are. What percentage of fluctuation is acceptable to us, to the producer, and also what are the conditions whereby we will or we will not use a system like this. So yeah, there's a lot of work happening in the background in order to find the best route for us, so that we can increase occupancy where we need to and increase yield where possible.
Thanks, that's really useful.
Thank you. Bob and then Chris.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take us back to the last meeting. I remain very concerned as to how it is that we ended up with this very nasty surprise that came in at the last minute and apparently wasn't previously anticipated. So can someone just talk me through again how that happened, please?
Yeah, sorry, but for the pause there, I think it's a potentially complex situation. It doesn't sit with one person, but maybe I'll start the answer and maybe colleagues can jump in as appropriate. So I believe Brian shared a briefing note ahead of this meeting a while ago that set out some of the causes of why that loss came as a surprise. I think from my point of view, some of the crux of that were around how the agility requirements of financial reporting for Beam really struggled to dovetail with the reporting requirements of a local authority finance system. There was a disconnect between that. And although it is something that we had highlighted, that we had raised as a concern, that we were, seeking to address, I think the time it took to really understand the scope of that was something that at least the scope of the challenge wasn't something that became clear to colleagues until we had that shock, at which point we knew the scope of that challenge and it was too late to do anything about it. So from my point of view, the crux of it is around actually our requirements at Beam and the kind of dynamism and the agility with which we need to receive financial information is very, very different to the normal operating processes and normal accounting processes for a local government. I think that for me is the core reason behind why that came as a shock. I don't know if colleagues have got things to add in.
Yeah, just to add to Steve's point, it's quite a good analysis of how, but the mechanics were quite simple in terms of at the year end, we didn't make as much income as we predicted and quite way off, and the expenditure was higher than we were anticipating. And those surprises only became known at the end of the last quarter, for the reasons that Steve outlined there in terms of the mismatch of the accounting systems, which is why we had that rather large surprise. So what I would say is we've spent the last 2 months pretty much on a daily basis trying to get those accounting procedures right to kind of inform this new business plan and make sure going forward there aren't any more surprises. That's my take on it.
Thank you. Bob?
Oh, with the chair's permission, I'm just going to stick with this for a bit. I think I said at the last meeting that I'm kind of personally on my third startup business, and the first two, which are started up and running very healthily, you just track everything almost every second. And this is the nub of what I'm not understanding as to how this very unpleasant surprise came out of nowhere. Until a substantial way through the year, you were projecting a deficit, and you were projecting a deficit, but all of a sudden that deficit got much, much bigger. And what I'm not getting is who was or should have been tracking the numbers basically every day. How did it just get away?
Yeah, I can certainly touch on that from Beam's perspective. So we obviously have a number of systems that are local to Beam. So we have full clarity, full transparency over all of our ticketing income, over our income over the bar, through our EPOS system, through recharges, etc., through space hire even, because that's their lines that we control locally. Where we struggled to get clarity was anything that ran through the kind of the broader council finance system that we don't have day-to-day access of, and as a result we're relying on reports provided to us from our colleagues in the accounts team, and we met with those colleagues on a monthly basis and highlighted, can we get some clarity on this line? This looks slightly odd, and it was that lack of, I suppose, understanding at our point, or lack of recognition or recognizing those numbers speaks to the way in which local authorities account for things versus the way we needed to account for things as a business. So there's been a mismatch between what we've been measuring at Beam and what's been coming through the council system. Sometimes that is simply due to the length of time it was taking for expenditure to go through the purchase order system, the invoice system, the payment system, to hit the ledger, to be, and then to come through onto the accounting system from which we can get a report. So there was a time delay there. Now there's lots and lots, as I'm sure you can imagine, there's lots of kind of financial control measures in place. There's lots of processes that have to happen before something is confirmed as expenditure and then hits that report. But from my point of view at Beam, absolutely, what we have needed to do is measure things on an hourly basis. Wherever we can, we do that. But there's been a big portion of our finances that we just haven't had access to, or haven't had the kind of agile access to that you would expect for a startup. And that is due to local authority processes, is my understanding. But equally, I've never worked for local government before, so I'm hoping that's not too far off the mark.
Well, if I might, I can see Ben moving his hand, but if I might just
one last one, and then we'll do a circle and come back.
Yeah, sure. Just to keep the flow of the conversation moving. Again, another thing that strikes me is what's been happening with cash, because basically you have a budget, you have a forecast. So your forecast for some time was that you make a deficit. Okay, we've got that. But somebody is running the business relative to that budget, so they know what their cash demand is. When things just get away from the budget, somebody somewhere must have realised that they're spending more cash every day, every month than they were. Well, either expending more cash every day, every month than they were expecting, or maybe the point really is that they're not making the income they were expecting, so the cash net that they're expending is much, much greater than they were expecting. What's going on there? In any normal business, you're watching cash like a hawk. Who was? I mean, you know, maybe this is a question for Councillor Hopewell and Ben. Who was watching the cash? Who was watching this every day?
Yeah, so from my point of view, the decisions that we were making with regards to how Beam was operating were twofold. Where we did have accurate data, we were making decisions on the data. Where we didn't, we were raising that we didn't have access to accurate data, and as a result, we were essentially making decisions in the dark. There has been robust dialogue between those of us at Beam and colleagues in accounts to highlight the challenges of trying to make those commercial decisions without really clear data. But I think we are guilty of underestimating the scale of the difference. You know, when we were forecasting, it was based on what we believed were the absolute most up-to-date figures that we had, and it was only after the end of Q4 we realised actually the figures that we had weren't as accurate as we thought, and the difference was significantly bigger than on a personal level than I had ever imagined. And that sinking feeling when that came out was profound, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Ben?
Yeah, just to supplement that, in terms of the two scenarios that Councillor Deering's outlined there, is it the kind of income not meeting the required targets, but also not monitoring the cash? Actually, it was both of those things, a combination of both of those things that led to some of those surprises. So Steve's already outlined some of the mismatch of the lack of information. The other thing is we had some late expenditure come through and some changes which we just missed and got wrong, and that was referenced in the last meeting and the briefing paper around the future income, 200k being moved to the future year, additional spend for casual staff, some of the producer settlements as well costing more than they expected. They just came through late, we weren't aware of them, and we got that wrong. I think the key thing for us now is to kind of look forward and make sure we've resolved all those issues. So yeah, some lessons learned for us, Beam and finance, us as the council, the finance department and Beam, to get all that right going forward.
Thank you very much, Ben. Sorry, Tom. We've got Chris, we'll have Mark, and then Tom. But very quickly, just a clarification. Does Beam use the same finance system as the council, or is it a separate system?
Yeah, so Beam uses the same accounting infrastructure as the council, yeah.
Fine, thank you. Chris?
It's a very quick thing. I think we need to extend congratulations. I'm sure the last time we spoke to you, you were going off on paternity leave. Hope it all went well, and congratulations. It was just really more of an observation about the dynamic pricing thing. I can see from the information you're giving, you're very reliant on getting the footfall up, both across the cinemas, the theatre and the cafe. Dynamic pricing is staggeringly unpopular. And I think if we employ that kind of mechanism for the one or two like really high end shows that we have, like Bill Bailey, for instance, we may put people off, because I can imagine getting a hell of a lot of complaints about that one. And really, I think the emphasis should really be on increasing the footfall across everything in all shows, not just the ones that make the money, because we don't have enough of those to really cover the budget deficit. All the other questions I've got, I think, have to come in part two. So, but yes, thank you for that.
Sorry, thank you, Chris. Yeah. Sorry, was there a question there, or is it?
I actually just realised that some of the questions I was going to ask might not need to be in part
Fine.
two in case they're sensitive, but I was just making an observation about the dynamic. It's just something we need to be aware of. It's very unpopular.
No, that's good.
We
Okay.
put people off.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, mine's more of a, I guess, part one question in terms of the sort of structure and style of the business plan. Is that sort of based on how council would run a service? Is it based on how other theatres would produce a business plan? Is it based on, you know, the treasurer got their sort of 5 case business plan approach? Just because if the business plan isn't right, then we're going to be in this position or in a worse position going forward. So I appreciate we'll talk about the sort of financial detail later, but just thinking, is the structure and style of the business plan right for the business that you're in?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Thank you, Mark. So when we created this, partly it was to bring absolute clarity, with reference to the challenges that we were having at that time around getting clarity. So in terms of the structure of it, we actually started from scratch, and which is why I appreciate it's actually quite difficult to see in the pack because of the limitations of ModGov. But the business plan is underpinned by a set of kind of flexible calculators. The idea being that we can see the kind of pounds and pence impact of even minor fluctuations by putting in those those changes on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and actually it gives us significantly more clarity than we've had before. Prior to kind of creating this, we did look at a number of other different business plan structures, ones that I've used in the past, ones that are common across the commercial sector. My view at that point was that actually what we needed was real clarity, something that could be clearly understood, something that actually was a little bit less granular than some that I'm used to. And that's why, you know, this is the kind of structure that we came up with in the end. Now, at the same time as that, we've been working on a kind of semi-automated forecasting tool. And I think the likelihood is that as that tool develops and as we iron out some of the eccentricities with it, that will form the basis of kind of the next iteration of this business plan structure, because that does give us more granularity and we've got more confidence in that kind of that model and the data that underpins it. But this was built at a time when we were really struggling for that clarity and those clarity around the numbers, which is why we in some ways have pulled it right the way back to basics and made it more of a live, more of a flexible document than something that is kind of written in stone.
Just a quick sort of follow-up, and obviously produced by the team and overseen by the board. Has there any sort of like third-party expertise challenge to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the construction of this, we sought out informal advice from external sector experts, one of whom from Arts Council of England and another who's a commercial theatre producer. And yeah, changes were made based on feedback from them. So yeah, it has had external scrutiny.
Thank you, Mark. We have Tom, Nick, and then David.
Thank you, Chair. I'm chomping at the bit to get stuck in actually to the fixed costs and also the legal structure. Are both of those items best dealt with in the next section?
Any advice on that, Ben? Or
Wait, I mean, you can ask us about the fixed costs, and but that's all in the public domain.
Yeah. So looking at the fixed costs again, I'm very concerned by them. I think they are going to, at the very least, slow you down from getting to where you need to be. And I understand why they're higher than they would be in another business, and therefore it leads me on to the legal structure between your entity and the council, and the way we've already seen the detrimental impact of it. We did discuss it in the last meeting, actually. I've been thinking it through since then, and I just feel like it's going to hold you back from all the good things that you want to do. And it's not because I don't have faith in the council. I really do, and I have faith in the officers, but that's not their raison d'etre to be involved with you know, your amazing facility, basically. So have conversations taken place since our last meeting? I really hope they have. And how far along is the thinking? Is there anything that anyone can share with us tonight on the legal structure? Thank you.
Yeah, so I absolutely can talk broadly, and then maybe Ben can chip in with more detail. But yeah, you're quite right. The local authorities running complex arts and culture organisations, there's not that many who are able to do it in a way that delivers a sustainable surplus, if any. So actually what BEAM has set out to do is, from day one, incredibly ambitious. Back when I first met this group in November 25, the issue of legal structure was raised, and the response at that time was, we are open to all different types of conversation to work out actually if there is a better model for the venue and also for the authority. It is not uncommon for local authority venues to be operated by third parties, like a charitable party, or even in some cases a commercial entity. It's not uncommon at all. In terms of the more recent conversations, I think that there is an active conversation around what a correct legal structure for BEAM might be. I don't think there's clarity on any outcome or any answers to those questions yet, but I think it is certainly something that is being discussed. I don't know, Ben, if you've got any more detail.
Yeah, just to add on the legal structures, we as officers, it's obviously a policy direction for the council, so it would be an executive and council decision to look at it. We as officers have been asked to kind of consider some of the implications and what that may look like and gather some information. But the actual instruction I've had for the short term, provide that information to colleagues on executive. The instruction I've had in the short term is to get BEAM on an even financial keel and get some stability and focus on that for the short term. What may come later on will be an executive decision.
Tom, yeah.
Yes, sorry. Can I just ask Councillor Hopewell a question about this? Because I'm acutely aware that most of the conversations these days are about local government reform. And I'd be very concerned if a decision was put off because of what might happen next year and the elections and so on and so forth. I think it would be a bold thing and something that I would support if you made a quick decision on how to take this forward under a different, perhaps, legal structure. I think you'd get support as well in the chamber for it. But as I say, it would be a bold decision. Can you just assure me that you're not going to kick the can down the road with this, please?
Thanks. I think it's important to be considered in decisions, and bold, quick decisions are not necessarily the correct decisions. So, I mean, I think from when Steve first started, we started having discussions around, what other ways could there be of running the venue, and as exec members, we've kind of just done our own background research, looking at kind of how other venues have operated. So, I mean, it's certainly not something that we're not considering. I mean, certainly it's something we can carry on looking at. I guess just the priority at this stage is making sure that the business plan does look viable. And I mean, there's also work going on about having a charitable arm as well, which could have an impact on that side of things. So I think we're keen to kind of get that up and running as a priority as well. And of course, now that we know that we're the 4 unitaries and there's spotlights in Broxbourne, which would then become part of the unitary, there could be opportunities between those 2 venues in terms of kind of what the wider offer would look like in terms of staff resourcing. So it wouldn't be about kicking the can down the road as such, but it'd be about looking at factoring how both options could look under LGR, I think. So I mean, I can say we're not going to be kicking the can down the road, and we're happy to look at it. And it's, thank you for your support in looking into things as well. I'm just cautious that we don't kind of just rush into something without kind of looking at it in the rounds and looking kind of 5-10 years down the line what that impact could be.
Thank you. 1 second, Chris. So I think Nick, David, Bob, and I'll come back to you, Chris.
My point is in response really to the answer given to Councillor Deering around the sort of how we find ourselves here and the sort of monitoring position and the proposal that's on the screen. And I just sort of question whether that is adequate for making sure we don't end up in the same position again. Thinking about more agile reporting and indicators that look forward as to how things are doing, and so whether that I'm not an expert, whether it's around future bookings or occupancy or future shows, but just having some indicators on a regular basis, and combine with that how Beam would react when those indicators may hit certain thresholds. Hopefully not, but if things deteriorate further than what the action would be. So it's a bit more sophisticated than just this is the income, this is the expenditure, and this is where we think we'll be. Because I think that there are certainly some indicators. Where I work, I have a weekly flash report which tells me the KPIs, and it allows me to respond. And it just feels like that is something. Now that may already happen within Beam, but in terms of the relevance of this to the materiality of this to the wider authority, I think the reporting might need to be a little bit more than we see on the screen.
Absolutely, I think we wholeheartedly agree. So part of the kind of the evolution of our kind of financial accounting processes is an accounting colleague embedded at Beam, and that is due to happen imminently, I believe, Alison. And that remit will be specifically to work with us at Beam and to work with colleagues up here at Wallfields to ensure that actually we are getting clarity of numbers, to make sure that our systems and council systems are matching, are dovetailing properly, but also as part of that to build out a much more sophisticated reporting model, whereby actually we do return to common practice of management accounts packs every month, and that actually that weekly reporting, which is happening locally at Beam against those KPIs, and they are updated on a weekly basis by me, to make sure that actually that doesn't just live at Beam and just live with me, that actually that has impact more broadly, so that we can be more agile in our decision making against the direction of financial travel. But yes, I think you're absolutely correct, and that is the ambition is absolutely to build out that sophisticated reporting.
Ben?
Just a supplementary to that, those other kind of key indicators, which are around kind of occupancy, average ticket price, and a whole raft of indicators, which I think Steve's previously presented at this committee, they do go to the Beam board, which meets on a quarterly basis. So the information is there, has been reported on. The income and expenditure is the kind of new thing, which, following on from recent developments, seems quite critical. I think if this committee is interested to see a bigger scorecard with all this other stuff in it, that's something we can certainly do, and I certainly understand the desire and the need for that. So that's something we can put together.
Thank you very much. Nick, do you want to supplement?
What I need to say, I'm not sure the committee is the right place for that particularly, but it's having that agility, and you mentioned that several times. But and I love management accounts. I'm an accountant, but actually sometimes it's just the half a dozen key KPIs that the real drivers behind the numbers that we really understand, and therefore can respond when they're not looking very good when you look forward. And it's having the ability for someone to make a decision on a quick basis as to what we do about it, and what are we going to do about it when occupancy drops to whatever, or future bookings drop by 20%. What is our response, and being really clear about that, so that's the sort of thing. So I don't want to sort of overdo the bureaucracy, and there's some great reporting going on already by the sound of it, and the Beam board will get that information, but it's how we react to that on an agile basis.
Thank you, Nick. David?
Thank you. Couple of observations, couple of questions, if I may. The observations, dynamic pricing, I appalled by the idea. I think if you get the tickets at a cheap price and then they go up, you might be lucky, but the person who's paying the higher price is going to feel gouged. If price goes down, the person who bought their tickets already is going to feel gouged. So I would strongly advise you to not do that. The other observation is that it's taken me a while for the penny to drop, but I now realise this is a business plan rather than a business case, and the distinction might seem a narrow one, but I think I was trying to understand why you weren't following the Treasury model for business cases. I think that's the answer, is it because it's a plan, and so it's much more of a free form document, if you like. The questions tie to some of the figures in that we can't discuss in part one. But I noticed on your programme for stage one, there's nothing in the diary until the 24th of August. So the stage one will be empty between now and the 24th of August. This is according to your website, not, which may be wrong, I accept that. Leaving a theatre dark for 3.5 weeks is going to make the figures in part two that we can't discuss at the moment really challenging. So I'd love to understand the thinking behind that, particularly school holidays, etc., etc. Although I'm looking forward to Dogman the musical in August. And on a related point, I understand you only showed one World Cup game. And my local theatre, South Mill Arts, which I always think of as kind of the little sibling of Beam, they showed every England game and they were packed out and the bar did very well. So it sounds like that was a bit of a missed opportunity, but there may have been reasons. So if you could clarify, that would be useful.
Absolutely. Yeah, really valid question. So in terms of August, historically, that has been a period for maintenance. So during that time, every single piece of technical equipment is removed from the theatre, is maintained, is fixed, is repaired, is cleaned, in order that the incredibly busy programme from September onwards can continue without a hitch. Now, I absolutely agree that having a dark theatre for that length of time isn't ideal. Which brings us to, you know, a minor challenge of the lack of available product or shows during August. There's very little out there touring. So actually what we've developed is a plan for next year whereby we actually reduce the amount of dark time across the building. We built in a new maintenance schedule that actually runs throughout the year in a phased way in order to minimize downtime. And across Beam next August will be kind of youth oriented creative learning work. So there'll be production work specifically designed for young people that will animate the building, that will bring audiences in, that will keep us really busy during you know, a time when this year and previous years the building would have been very quiet. So yeah, absolutely, I wholeheartedly agree, and we have a plan to be much more animated from next year onwards. In terms of the football, so we took the decision to live stream football matches if England got to the semi-finals. And partly that's because for us, there are a number of different, or were at the time, a number of different kind of considerations as to how best to do it. How do we, you know, live stream this properly? What are the licensing implications, etc. And also, where is there gaps in the diary? You know, our program, the dates sometimes fill up, you know, up to 2 years in advance. So it's, you know, it's not always guaranteed that we will have specific dates available. That said, what we have absolutely learnt is that it is something we should be doing more of. So already in the diary are placeholders for future sporting tournaments, whether it be the Women's World Cup, the Euros, etc. We are also exploring the possibility of live streaming other types of a kind of sporting event in stage 2 and turning it into more of a kind of a immersive experience. So yeah, I think you know, the criticism, were we late to the party, is potentially valid, but I can say that, you know, we've absolutely learned from the success of the event that we ran this summer, and have plans to introduce more of them into the programme to fill the future dates.
The last one, David. You can find your mic.
3 weeks seems a long time to be dark, though. Is that the time you need for maintenance, or it's time you're using for maintenance because you don't have extra?
No, so if we do all the maintenance in one go, that's absolutely the time we need for maintenance, and they're long days. But with the new what we term our asset management plan, by kind of spreading out the maintenance across the year in a phased fashion, it means that we don't have to close or don't have to be dark for quite that period, which is the plan for next year.
Thank you. Bob?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm coming back to the alignment issue. You've said many times this evening that there's a misalignment between the way the theatre operates and the council. And you said that several times at the last meeting. I'm hearing you saying, I think, that you have internally within Beam, you generate reports, etc., etc. I'm not quite clear at the moment whether those reports reach the council, or if they do, the council does nothing with them. So I'd like a little bit of clarification on the last point. But within that, I've got two more specific questions. There was a reference to systems earlier. I took that to be a reference to accounting systems, you know, Sage or whatever it is. Is it that you are using the same system as the council, but your two systems are not the same system, or are you actually on the common system? And then I've got one more question on structure, which I'll come back to when you've answered. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'll give an example. So the way in which East Herts Council kind of counts income is it counts it at the point at which it arrives in the bank, whereas the way in which Beam needs to account for income is at the maturation of the event it's for. So for us, we may sell, in fact, you know, this morning we've sold well over 100 tickets for a show that went on sale yesterday. That event isn't until March. So for us, we are putting that into March because that's for a show in March. And if that show doesn't happen, we don't get the money. Whereas the standard process for the council would be to count that income now because it's hit the bank. So for us, that's a disconnect. And that makes forecasting very, very, very difficult because every single show generally will, you know, it's very difficult to forecast when the tickets are going to be sold, whereas we can forecast what the outcome, what the total number of tickets for an event will be. So our forecasting is based on, I suppose, the financial impact on an event by event basis, but the numbers that we receive from the council system are income received as it's received, and those two things just don't match. In terms of the system itself, yeah, we're all on the same system, but it's so there's no difference there. The difference is how, you know, how we need to account for things in order to provide accurate forecasting.
So just really one quick supplementary. Peter, do you mind just moving on the slide to give an example of what that looks like in practice? So the income and expenditure at the end of June is quite a good example of what Steve's saying there. So actually, according to that, if you were to take where we are with the council ledger at the moment, we've got a surplus of £246,000. But as Steve said, that's not quite accurate once you build in all the forecasts and all the adjustments over the year to give us that loss. So it's quite a useful way of explaining the difference between the two things.
Bob.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so the second point I want to come back to is the question of structure. As I understand what you said this evening, I think you've said that you have been talking to the council about structure since November 2025. I'd just like to remind everybody in the room, particularly Councillor Hopewell, that at the last full council, I raised a question to the executive member for finance. And I asked if structure would be looked at, given all the comments made by Steve at the previous meeting. And to get to the point, Councillor Britton's answer was no. It won't be looked at, and it won't be looked at because of LGR on the horizon. I didn't think that was an acceptable answer, and your portrayal of the position is not consistent with what Councillor Britton said at the full council. I'd like to know exactly what the position is, please. It seems clear as a pikestaff that the theatre would like the issue of structure to be addressed. And addressing an issue doesn't mean you rush to a decision. It means you consider the issue. And I think that's what I'm hearing Steve saying he would like to happen. Well, I'd like to know what on earth is going on about it.
So if I just may jump in very, very quickly, I think so for officers working at Beam, I don't think it's that we want to pursue a different structure. I think it's that we will support any additional conversation around what the future structure of Beam may look like if that conversation wants to be had. And I think the kind of crux of the conversation around structure comes back to those fixed costs. We know that it's much more expensive to recruit people into a council personnel system than it would be elsewhere. And I think it's perhaps worth just sharing that a change in structure in the short term would have no impact on that, because those kind of those costs are contractual. So every employee would be tupied over to any new organisation on the same terms and conditions. So in the short term, there would be no saving. It would, it would continue as is, which makes that, which I suppose is why that conversation is something that we would support if it wanted to be.
Well, if I could squeeze a quick one in as well, absolutely. I mean, I think we all understand this. Pay rates and pension provision arrangements are much more expensive in a local government context than they would be in a commercial theatre context. I mean, I think it's appropriate to remind everybody that at the moment, the 25-26 year means that the theatre's hemorrhaging £20,000 a week. And I have the executive member for finance telling me that he's not willing to look at structure until LGR kicks in when is it, 2027? That cannot be right. And Councillor Hopewell this evening has said something which is not consistent with what Councillor Britton said at the full council meeting. I don't think it's acceptable.
Thank you, Bob. Alison, did you want to mention something or?
Yes, I was just going to give some reassurance about the reconciliations that are in place currently between the finance system and Beam. A lot of work's been put in. We've brought in some additional staff to look at those processes and support Steve and the team in forecasting. Since about February time, we've been looking at that. So we are working very closely with the theatre, and we have a new officer starting in the next couple of weeks to then be that vital link between the two.
Thank you. Chris and then Sue.
It's a very quick thing, and I'm going to apologise for my not being able to understand this very well in advance, because it's probably just me not understanding something. But I was going through the actual ticket prices that you've quoted as, and that's your income. I'm assuming that that's your net income after you've taken off all the costs.
So it's a great question. So that figure represents the net income per ticket after things like VAT and any booking commission, but it includes the producer share.
Oh, okay.
So the producer share comes in as a theatre expense further down the plan.
Okay. The only reason why I'm asking is because it's not entirely clear, because obviously the pricing that you're quoting on the public pay is higher than that. So when we're looking at those figures, we're looking at kind of encouraging more football. I mean, I have to say, getting 68% occupancy in the theatre in this day and age is actually pretty good going, actually. But you do need more. That's the problem. The Beam does need more. I don't suppose it's possible to get a sense of what the kind of like that's the actual income you're going to take home and put in your pocket. That £9.50 you currently quoted, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's potentially worth exploring in more detail in part 2.
Okay.
But built into the business plan are calculators around cost of sale for events in different spaces and different types of events. But in terms of the proportion of income that we keep versus the proportion of income that we don't, we've got forecasts on that built into the plan.
Okay.
All of that feeds that top sheet. But it might be worth discussing in more detail.
Yeah. Okay. The only reason I'm asking is it a potential place where that we can look at growth where we get the biggest share of that?
Yeah, so it's been a real key area of focus for us as part of commercialising our contracts. Okay. So in terms of the approach to programming and those commercial negotiations, we have seen our share rise from from when we first opened up to kind of where we are now. We have seen quite a significant increase. A lot of that is to do with the changes that we've made to ticketing, to recharging, etc., and to the kind of ancillary terms that sit outside of the main commercial deal. All of those go into our contracts. As we touched on last month, because we contract so far in advance, it can take a while for the impact of that to be felt, but it's starting to come through now.
Okay, fine. I mean, we'll probably go into it more in part 2, because I was going to ask more questions about how that can be, because obviously we want to be able to hold on to as much as we can, particularly as ticket prices are going up, so our actual overall footfall potentially might drop.
Okay, thank you. So Sue.
Thank you. Trying to be a bit more optimistic looking forward. I'm just thinking about potential growth areas. I know cinema occupancy is an industry-wide issue, around 27% occupancy, but obviously that's a big area for potential growth as well. I wonder if there's any mileage in diversifying what sort of films are on offer, appealing to different niche markets and trying to attract perhaps a younger teenage, young adult audience. I mean, we went to the cinema in London last week, to the Prince Charles Cinema, and they have a whole program of niche films, no current available ones, and it was really busy and popular. And I wonder if there's a potential in hosting things like themed film festivals, gaming or Comic-Con events to attract a larger audience, because they're growth markets.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your suggestions. They are things that we have considered very much as part of the midterm plan. So throughout the course of the last kind of 18 months, we've been introducing new strands into the cinema program. And we've been learning from every new strand that's been introduced. So things like our Lighthouse strand, which is kind of much more indie films. Also, we've learned that actually hosted screenings are something that is really popular. So we've increased the amount of hosted screenings that we do as well. We've also made changes to some of the strands that we've introduced over the last year, and have kind of, I think, repositioned some of the offer, particularly in light of actually introducing more screenings on Mondays, which we previously haven't done. So we've repositioned some of the program in order to cater for more people. In terms of that audience growth, yeah, it's absolutely a priority for us. And actually, just this week, we have been looking into potential kind of available funding that will help us invest in additional kind of marketing tools in order that we can reach more people. Part of the challenge with cinema is that because occupancy rates are so low right across the sector, any investment that we make has to be really carefully balanced by what in some cases can be quite meager returns. So we've been quite cautious, and that's why we've taken a phased approach to introducing those additional strands over the last year, 18 months. They are growing now, which is good, and that's been responsible for some of the kind of the growth across occupancy percentage that we've seen over the last year.
I just wonder how the new website is helping with sales generally and for cinema, and whether whether the membership function is helping to drive ticket sales and additions like food and beverage. And I'm not sure, I haven't checked whether, do you offer advanced food and beverage booking on the website, because that will drive sales more than on the day, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the new website is performing well. It is meeting its commercial goals. I'm afraid I haven't got up-to-date data on the website performance, but I'd be very happy to share that with this group afterwards once I've got it clear from colleagues. In terms of advanced ordering for food and beverage, yeah, absolutely, it is something that is a real priority for us. We're in the process of launching a program called Visit One, actually, which will host all of that pre-ordering for us. The reason that we're using Visit One, it's a change from a previous product, which was, in my view, not as good value. So we've changed provider, and as a result of that, it makes it much more streamlined for people to pre-order their food and beverage packages with us. That's in the process of being introduced right now, so yeah, should be done well in time for a busy autumn season.
Thank you. I think we're probably at the end of part one, unless there's any more questions. No more questions? Well, on that basis, and hearing obviously people's comments that they've got questions for part two, I move that under section 100A4, the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public will be excluded from the meeting during the discussion of item 5, appendices A, B and C, on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the said act, and the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. May I please have a seconder for this? Sue, thank you very much. Can I please have a show of hands about moving into part two? That is unanimous and carried. So Okay, we're back broadcasting again. So, last round of questions. If there are any questions relating to Beam, David and Tom. Yeah.
I say it's not a question, it's a proposal. If you could come back to me. Thank you.
Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just something that popped into my my head when you talked about your newborn, which is fantastic, by the way. So I remember going back now, my twins are 21, but going back to when they were very young, we used to, I think Saturday morning, go to Cineworld, and it was a loss leader. So I think they sold the tickets for £3 or £4 each. But of course, looking at the sea of popcorn all over the floor, the ancillary sales were significant, and I would assume that there was some upside on that. I'm just wondering if you do that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a cinema strand called Children's Corner, which is kind of mornings at the weekend. It's actually a strand that we're in the process of refining to make it work a little bit better for everybody. But yeah, absolutely, it's a key part of the programme.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Chair. Since we're now back in part one, just for the benefit of the public who may have stuck out the lack of coverage, we've had a very, very good discussion, and the chairman said this when we were still in part two, but I'd just like to say now that we're back in part one. Steve, you've done nearly all the talking tonight, and we've faced a lot of questions, including from me. We do all appreciate very much that you've held your corner. I'm going to run on from that to say that there is a confidence issue in this room as to the reliability of the projections. We have heard you say that the discovery late in the day that we were heading for a much bigger deficit than we had thought we would be was shocking, and or you were shell shocked. Speaking personally, that must never happen again. This is absolutely no way to run a chip shop. And I expect that every effort will be made to ensure that happens. I'd also like to thank Ben, because you've stepped in and been pretty straightforward in some of the things you've said. But I think we need to be clear that ultimately it's the portfolio holder here who's responsible for this, and there needs to be an improvement. I mentioned this when we were in part one originally, but the issue of the structure of the theatre is very important. And it is my view that needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed as soon as possible. That's without prejudging the outcome, because we cannot keep hemorrhaging money without taking all the available steps. Steve has advised a figure that relates specifically to one aspect of the problem arising because the theatre is just part of the council, and it clearly needs to be addressed. Going forward, I think this is going to have to come back to this committee absolutely regularly, and it will have to keep coming back to this committee until we are satisfied that we're not going to have another shock, and we think that things are properly under control. And that's not meant as a criticism to you again, Steve, and you've spoken at great length this evening and dealt with all our questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments before I draw David back in? No more around the table. David, a suggestion then?
Thank you. 3 parts to the recommendation. First one is that Audit and Governance welcomes the important cultural and economic contribution Beam makes to its arts and beyond. I know it's already been mentioned this evening, but I think it's really important to re-emphasise that. That's an important part of the context of this discussion. Secondly, we also note the revised business plan presented to Audit and Governance at this meeting. The third item is, however, we remain concerned that the economic performance and the financial management of the venue, noting the £970,000 loss in 25-26, and therefore call upon the Executive Member for Wellbeing to present monthly updates to Audit and Governance on Beam's economic performance tracked against the financial projections in this business case. Just to be clear on that recommendation, and Michelle, I'll send that wording to you. That doesn't mean we have to meet monthly, We just have a report monthly. Can meet monthly if you like. Obviously, that's a matter for the chair. In terms of the end date of that, I estimated end of Q3 of this financial year, but I think obviously the committee would probably be flexible about that. But we need to put an end date in simply for us to vote on it. So I would say till end Q3 26-27, with a review at that point as to whether to continue the monthly reporting or not. Would it be worth me just repeating that?
So the recommendation, I think, as stands, that it's a recommendation to the executive member for wellbeing. That's what we're talking about here. The recommendations you're making. Now, there's nothing wrong, obviously, with reporting to getting, recommendation that the executive member reports to us, but we don't necessarily. I know it's ideal, and we're eating our own porridge in this sense, because if we're saying that we should monitor it more closely, then maybe the audit and governance should audit to do that more closely. But the recommendation as stands, I think, is sufficient for, given the conversations that we've had already, the officers have noted these anyway. So all I would say is, if we change it, then I think we are over elaborating it personally. But
I disagree with respect. There's a very specific request here, which is for a monthly update, which isn't in the current recommendation.
Bob?
Thank you very much, Martin. With respect, I don't agree with the way you've just put it. It just seems completely clear to me that there is, as David said a few minutes ago, there's a lack of confidence here, and I think this committee should have reports once a month for a period of time. I'm not myself sure that running up to the end of Q3 is enough time, but I certainly think that this committee should receive that, and I think we should require it. And for what I, for one, will be very supportive of the amended recommendation that David has suggested. And I think if necessary, that should go to a vote.
Councillor Hopewell.
Thank you. We're going to be getting monthly reports, so I'm happy to forward that on to members of this committee and any other members. So that's definitely fine from our point of view.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we gonna note that, so at least we can. No. So there will be attached as part of the minutes what is happening, so the actions. Yeah. You're all looking at me thinking So we took recommendations at the joint scrutiny meetings that we logged and then forwarded to the executive members. That's effectively what we're doing now. Tom?
Could we not, though, if it's the will of the members here to vote on David's excellent suggestion, regardless of whether or not you adopt it, can we show that we support it? And whether or not it's your procedure prohibits it, the fact of the matter is it's the will of this committee that it must be done. That's how I would like to put it.
So we're going to vote then, and I think the recommendation from Michelle is that we'll have a B to the recommendations, and that will include what you have just said. So the monthly updates brought to the committee, Are you sure you want to recommend that we meet monthly as well?
No, I didn't say that at all.
Ah. Okay, but we'll get monthly reports. And what was the other point?
There were 3 points: welcoming the contribution of Beam, which I would like to go in the
Yeah, certainly.
minutes, noting the revised business plan, and then the monthly reports, which, given that that's been agreed by the executive member, I'm not
So
sure.
can we have a vote on this then?
The Audit and Governance Committee require a monthly update from the executive member on Beam's position, and that doesn't have to be a meeting. That can be via email to the committee. Is that what we're saying? Yeah. Okay. I think that's the only other recommendation we need to get in there.
Certainly. Okay, Bob.
It's always good to come down to procedure, isn't it? I'm a bit confused by the conversation. David's run some wording by us. I think I'm understanding really that you're saying that your suggested wording would be instead of the existing wording, aren't you? Or, as Martin has just said, a paragraph B to the existing wording. I'm not really understanding why we don't just agree that David's wording become part of the recommendation arising from this meeting. Don't see the issue.
Sorry, I'm not understanding what you mean by that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So the wording, can you just, sorry about this, David, and sorry for putting the pressure on you. Just read through the wording so we can document and then vote on it.
All 3, or just the slightly contentious?
All 3.
All 3. 1, Audit and Governance welcomes the important cultural and economic contribution Beam makes starts and beyond. 2, we also note the revised business plan presented to Audit and Governance at this meeting. 3, however, we remain concerned that the economic performance and the financial management of the venue, noting the 270,000 loss in 25-26, and therefore call upon the executive member for wellbeing to present monthly updates to Audit and Governance on Beam's economic performance tracked against the financial projections in this business case until the end of Q3 26-27, with a review at that point as to whether to continue the monthly reporting or not. I will send you that wording if we approve it.
Yeah, send it to me. Okay, on that basis, and that's being proposed, can I have a seconder for that, Bob? Can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? And those abstaining? That motion is carried. So that is the recommendation for this council for this particular session. So taking both now, we recommend, can I please have a proposer for both A and B? Bob, thank you. And a seconder? David, thank you. Can I have a show of hands? Those in favour? That's 4. Those against? And those abstaining? 2. That motion is carried. Thank you very much. Are we there? Okay. So thank you very much. We've just past 9 o'clock. There's no urgent items. So on that basis, I'd like to thank everyone tonight. It's been a very tough session, but very rewarding, hopefully. And I will see you at the next meeting at 5 minutes past